You know when you feel the universe is conspiring? I wouldn't believe it myself if I didn't have all the details of this story. Maria was an artist, living her routine in Lisbon, when impossible coincidences started happening. It was as if something bigger was, well, let me tell you the story properly. Do you believe in impossible coincidences? Tell me in the comments, and follow Sparks Fly Stories channel for stories that make you believe in destiny. Ready to discover what happened?
Maria stepped back from her latest canvas, the morning light filtering through her Lisbon studio windows, revealing what her family would call another unmarketable masterpiece. The oil paint still glistened wet where she had captured the raw emotion of street performers she observed from her apartment balcony, their passion for art contrasting sharply with the sterile perfection her wealthy suitors expected from a painter of her social standing. Her phone buzzed insistently on the marble table, another message from Eduardo, the banker's son, promising dinner at the city's most expensive restaurant if she would just consider his marriage proposal. But Maria's eyes drifted instead to the unfinished corner of her painting, where she had started to sketch a figure whose music seemed to pour directly from his soul onto the cobblestones below. The spacious studio, funded by her father's textile fortune, felt more like a gilded cage than a creative sanctuary, especially when she remembered how her art professor had warned her that true artists must choose between comfort and authenticity. Words that echoed louder each time another eligible bachelor appeared at their family dinners. She wiped paint from her fingers with a cloth that had seen 1,000 such moments, wondering why her heart raced more when she heard guitar melodies drifting up from the street, than when diamond earrings arrived with romantic notes from men who saw her paintings as charming hobbies rather than glimpses into her deepest self. Something was shifting in her world, like the moment before dawn when darkness begins to surrender to light, and Maria felt certain that today would bring a choice that would change everything she thought she knew about love, art, and the courage required to live authentically. The music reached Maria before she saw its source, a melody so raw and honest that it stopped her mid-step on Rua Augusta, her morning coffee cooling in her hands, as street vendors and tourists flowed around her like water around a stone. She followed the sound through the crowd until she found him, a young man with calloused fingers dancing across guitar strings, his eyes closed as if the music came from somewhere deeper than memory. And when he opened them and looked directly at her, something electric passed between them that made her forget she was supposed to be meeting Eduardo for lunch in 20 minutes. His voice joined the guitar in a Portuguese folk song she remembered her grandmother humming. But the way he sang it felt like a conversation meant only for her, each note carrying an ache she recognized in her own chest when she painted late into the night, searching for something she could never quite name. Maria found herself stepping closer, mesmerized by how his weathered hands that had clearly known work beyond music, moved with such tenderness across the strings, and she realized with startling clarity that this was what had been missing from every expensive dinner and diamond bracelet her suitors had offered. The small crowd around him dispersed as the song ended, leaving coins in his guitar case. But Maria remained frozen in place when he smiled at her with a warmth that reached his dark eyes, making her heart race in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifyingly familiar. "I've been watching you from your balcony," he said in accented English, somehow knowing she would understand, and her breath caught because she had never mentioned to anyone that she painted by her balcony windows, never told a soul about the solitary figures she sketched while observing the street below. "You know my building?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper, and when he nodded with that same knowing smile, pointing toward the exact window where she spent her mornings, Maria felt the world tilt slightly off its axis, because a coincidence seemed impossible, unless it wasn't a coincidence at all. "João," he said simply when she asked his name, and the way he pronounced it made the common Portuguese name sound like music itself, while his calloused fingers traced absent patterns on his guitar strings, as if composing a song about her in real time. Maria found herself sitting on the cobblestones beside his guitar case, ignoring the expensive fabric of her designer dress and the curious glances from passers-by, because something about his presence made her forget she had ever cared about appearances or what her father's business associates might think if they saw the textile heiress sitting on a street corner.
Can you feel how these two souls are connecting on such a deep level? Maria is discovering something she never expected to find. Follow Sparks' Fly Stories channel to witness more incredible connections that prove love finds us when we least expect it. Now, shall we continue our story?
When João spoke about his music, his eyes lit up with the same passion she felt when mixing colors on her palette at dawn. And Maria realized with startling recognition that he described melody the way she described light, as something alive that demanded to be captured before it disappeared forever. "I watch people from my window across the street," he said, gesturing toward a narrow building she had never noticed despite looking out her balcony every morning. "And I compose songs about their stories, especially the lonely ones who paint while the city sleeps." And her breath caught because he somehow knew about her sleepless nights at the easel, the way she worked through heartbreak and confusion with brushstrokes that no one else ever saw. Their conversation flowed like watercolors, bleeding into each other, each shared memory or dream revealing another impossible connection. He had grown up listening to the same Portuguese lullabies her grandmother sang, had lost his mother the same year Maria's had died, even dreamed of traveling to the same remote village in northern Portugal where time seemed suspended between mountains and sky. But as the afternoon sun began to cast longer shadows across Rua Augusta, Maria noticed how João's eyes kept drifting toward the expensive watch on her wrist, the designer purse at her feet, and the way tourists occasionally dropped larger bills into his case when they assumed she was his wealthy patron rather than someone genuinely captivated by his soul. The first whisper of doubt crept through her enchantment when she saw him glance toward the direction of her father's textile factory, visible in the distance, and she wondered if the connection she felt so powerfully was something he calculated rather than discovered. Because the timing of everything seemed too perfect, too convenient, too much like a story someone might orchestrate for reasons she was afraid to imagine. The barriers arose slowly but unmistakably, like shadows creeping across Lisbon's cobblestones as dusk approached, and Maria felt the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her chest when her father mentioned Eduardo's proposal again over dinner. Each pointed comment about suitable matches and social responsibility feeling like walls rising between her and the music that had awakened something profound in her soul. The contrast between her world of gallery openings and designer gowns and Joao's realm of street corners and calloused hands became increasingly stark, and she found herself caught between two realities that seemed determined to remain separate. Her father's disapproval manifested in subtle but unmistakable ways. The way conversations stopped when she entered rooms, the carefully orchestrated encounters with eligible bachelors from textile families, and the gentle but persistent suggestions that she focus on practical matters rather than her art, which he had always tolerated as a charming hobby, but never respected as a serious pursuit. Maria realized with growing dread that choosing Joao would mean not just rejecting Eduardo's wealth and status, but potentially losing her family's support, her access to the art supplies and studio space that made her painting possible, and the comfortable life she had always known. Final test came when she discovered a letter her father had written to a potential business partner, mentioning plans to settle Maria's romantic notions and ensure she made a sensible choice that would benefit both families. And she understood with crystalline clarity that her love for Joao was seen not as a beautiful connection, but as a problem to be solved. Standing at her balcony window, watching the street where Joao played his guitar, Maria faced the impossible decision between love and everything else that defined her existence, knowing that whatever choice she made would irrevocably change the course of her life.
The separation came with the ruthless efficiency of her father's business decisions, Maria thought, as she watched Joao's guitar case disappear around the corner of Rua Augusta for what she believed would be the last time, her heart breaking in ways she hadn't known were possible, as the reality of her father's ultimatum settled into her bones like winter cold. Eduardo's engagement ring sat heavy in her pocket, a golden shackle that represented everything she was supposed to want, but felt like a betrayal of everything she had discovered about herself in Joao's presence. And when her father's driver delivered the message that Joao had been compensated appropriately and would no longer be performing in their neighborhood, Maria understood with devastating clarity that her family's wealth could buy anything except her happiness. This moment is breaking Maria's heart, and probably yours too. The pain she's feeling right now, it's about to change everything in ways you can't imagine. Hit that like button if you're feeling the emotion of this story, and trust me, you need to see what happens next. Shall we continue our story? The forced engagement dinner felt like a funeral for her dreams, each toast to her bright future, with Eduardo echoing in her chest like the death knell of authentic love, while she sat in her designer dress, thinking of calloused hands that had touched guitar strings with the same reverence she felt when mixing colors at dawn. Her father's satisfied smile across the mahogany table told her everything about how thoroughly he believed he had solved the problem of her romantic delusions. But what he couldn't see was how the separation had only crystallized her understanding that what she felt for Joao transcended the comfortable arrangements her world offered, because losing him had taught her the difference between loving someone and needing to breathe. The cruelest discovery came when she returned to her studio and found her half-finished painting of the street musician, realizing with soul-crushing recognition that she had been unconsciously painting Joao's essence for weeks before she even knew his name, her brush somehow capturing the loneliness in his eyes and the poetry in his posture in ways that suggested their connection had existed in her heart long before their eyes had met on that cobblestone street. Standing at her balcony window, searching desperately for any sign of him in the empty spaces where his music once filled her mornings. Maria felt the full weight of understanding that loving someone truly meant accepting that some connections couldn't be bought, sold, or destroyed by family disapproval. They could only be buried alive, where they would either die slowly or find a way to resurface when the soul could no longer pretend it didn't need what it had lost. But as she touched her grandmother's rosary and whispered a prayer she wasn't sure she believed, Maria noticed something that made her heart skip with impossible hope. A single white envelope had been slipped under her studio door, and the handwriting looked hauntingly familiar. The envelope trembled in Maria's hands as she recognized not João's handwriting, but her father's distinctive script. And when she unfolded the letter with growing dread, the words that greeted her shattered everything she thought she knew about coincidence, destiny, and the cruel mathematics of arranged love. "My dear Maria," the letter began, "by the time you read this, you will have discovered that your street musician was hired by me 3 months ago to perform precisely where you paint each morning, because I believed that exposing you to bohemian romance would cure you of such foolish notions forever. I never anticipated that you would actually fall in love with him, or that he would refuse the final payment I offered to disappear permanently." Maria's legs gave way as the devastating truth unraveled before her eyes. Every stolen glance from João's window, every perfectly timed song that matched her mood, every conversation that felt like destiny had been choreographed by her father's calculating mind. Yet what should have felt like the ultimate betrayal instead illuminated something far more profound than she had ever imagined. The letter continued with her father's admission that João had thrown the money back at him, declaring that whatever had begun as a performance had become the most authentic thing in his life, and that he would rather live in poverty than accept payment for loving her, because some connections transcended the circumstances that created them, becoming real despite their artificial origins. But it was the final paragraph that made Maria's heart soar with impossible understanding. "I write this letter because I have come to realize that a love strong enough to transform a paid arrangement into genuine devotion, and powerful enough to make both of you choose each other over financial security, deserves not my opposition, but my respect. João is waiting for you at the old cathedral where your grandmother was married, and I give you both my blessing to prove that the heart's mathematics can indeed be more profound than any business calculation I have ever made." Standing in her studio, surrounded by canvases that had somehow captured this love story before it even began, Maria understood with crystalline clarity that the greatest loves are not those that happen by accident, but those that choose to become real despite every reason they were given to remain false. In the quiet solitude of her studio, surrounded by canvases that bore witness to her journey, Maria felt an overwhelming sense of peace that had eluded her for months, the weight of family expectations and societal constraints finally lifting as she embraced the uncertainty of a love that had been tested by fire and emerged unbroken. The letter in her hand was a testament not only to her father's change of heart, but to the power of love to bridge divides that once seemed insurmountable. And as she made her way to the old cathedral where João awaited, each step felt like a beat in the symphony of a new beginning. Arriving at the cathedral, the air thick with the scent of ancient stone and blooming jasmine, Maria found João waiting beneath the towering arches, his guitar slung over his back, and a hopeful smile illuminating his face. And in that moment, the barriers that had once threatened to keep them apart dissolved, replaced by a shared understanding that love's true mathematics lay not in the calculations of wealth or status, but in the courage to defy all odds. As their hands intertwined, the echoes of João's melodies intertwined with the soft murmur of the congregation, creating a harmony that resonated through the centuries, and Maria realized with a profound sense of completion that their love was not just a fleeting spark, but a flame forged in adversity, destined to illuminate the path ahead no matter what challenges they would face. Looking out over the city from the cathedral's steps, Maria whispered a silent vow to cherish the love that had found her against all odds, understanding that the true victory was not in the approval of others, but in the unwavering devotion that had survived every trial. And as the sun dipped below Lisbon's horizon, their souls danced to a rhythm only they could hear, forever entwined in a love that transcended time itself. What an incredible journey of love conquering all odds. Maria and João's story proves that sometimes the most beautiful connections are forged through the greatest challenges. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in destined love, smash that like button and subscribe to Sparks Fly Stories channel for more tales that show love's perfect mathematics, how hearts find each other against impossible odds. Share this story with someone who believes in true love.